Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anna Magzania. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm the president of LA Times Studios, and we're passionate about storytelling with that meets impact. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by some brilliant minds redefining how brands engage audiences, from philanthropic storytelling to digital innovation to next-gen culture and cinematic narratives. We're calling this session Brand is Back, but the real question is, what does that even mean in today's world? Before we get started with the panels, I want to just allow me a couple minutes to introduce our panelists. We're going to start with Lauren Wood at the end. Lauren is the president of Yogi Foundation and global head of social impact and innovation at Yogi. She leads the company's philanthropic vision, bridging storytelling, community development, and regeneration well-being. Can everybody hear me back there? You guys good? Yeah? You want to come forward? Come on forward if you're good. Okay, great. I just can't tell because it's a little noisy. Next, we've got, right next to Lauren, we've got Amy Powell. Amy's the president of Vice Studios, an award-winning executive and producer known for leading development and production of high-profile television, film, and digital content. Please welcome Amy. Next to Amy, we've got Ziad Ahmed. He's the head of Next Gen at UTA and the founder of Juve Consulting, a Gen Z agency he launched at the age of 16. Today, he's helping some of the world's biggest brands stay culturally fluent and relevant to young audiences. And then next to me, I've got Adam Faze. He is the co-founder of Gymnasium. It's a digital studio behind 500 million views short film hits like Boy, Room, and Left on Red. He's redefining viral storytelling for the scroll generation. As we all know, we are all in that generation now. But we're going to get right started. So at the heart of the question, I'm just going to go straight to it. What does brand mean to you now? What you've heard, that brand is back, but in an era where content is everywhere and audiences are increasingly skeptical of what's being sold and what makes brand meaningful and magnetic.
It is so wonderful to be here with you today and to be with such extraordinary panelists on this hot summer day. And thank you to the LA Times and Monks for having us. When I think about this question of what a brand means today, what it invokes to me is that increasingly, I think people ourselves often think of ourselves as brands, because brand to me is just a story. And I think in an era, in a moment where external validation is so intrinsic to the experience that all of us, whether we want to or not, have to navigate, the story that we tell about ourselves is the most powerful story that we can tell. And in the era of AI and innovation and technology, I think more of us are looking for more human stories than ever. We're looking for shit that cuts through the noise and is honest and speaks with moral clarity and integrity, right? In regards to what we are experiencing as humans amidst such a tumultuous moment in the world. Why I'm proud to do the work that I do, running a Gen Z marketing agency now inside of UTA, is that UTA sits at the intersection of every major story that's being told. Whether that's traditional, or whether that's in traditional media, or whether that's in new age media, we are at the center of stories. And I think all brand is what is the story that we are telling about ourselves, and what is the truth that we are telling about ourselves. And I think that oftentimes brands think of brand as an advertising tool as opposed to a storytelling tool, but I think the opportunity is to really reconfigure our imagination in this moment to reprioritize the integrity that needs to be intrinsic within our art and within our stories, because I think that's what the audience and consumer is ultimately asking for.
I think the only thing I would add to that is I think we're living in this era where audiences are very smart to know that where they give their time, attention, and money is very important. And they want to make sure that they're spending their time and attention and money on the brands that actually speak for the values that they stand for. And so I think that is what that logo actually represents. It's wanting to make sure that they stand for the values that you represent you as a human. And I think in this era of AI, where all these algorithms are going to start being flooded with a lot more content that's probably not made by humans, the most important thing you could be is human and actually have a brand that represents something.
Thank you. I'm actually really privileged to have such a diverse group of talent. So my next set of questions is going to be very specific to each one and what they're doing in their field. So Amy, I'm going to kind of pivot to you for a second. Vice has built its identity on bold, counterculture storytelling. As you expand in this new role globally, how do you preserve that edge, right? We're all trying to have that edge, but making room for a broader, more diverse audience. Basically, like, how do you evolve without losing its soul of what the brand stands for?
I think that, for me, Vice can represent stories that dig really deep. I think there's a lot of content right now that sort of skims the surface. And you might know something about a character, but it never digs really deep to sort of tell something that's more metaphorical. So, for example, when I was at Paramount, I produced a show called 13 Reasons Why. And it was about teen suicide. And it surfaced an issue that people weren't talking about at the time. And we sort of came to it through a book that Selena Gomez brought me. And we did a little research to understand how many kids were searching for teen suicide. And it was so apparent that it was like a conversation that people really wanted to have, but were afraid to have. So we thought if we created a show that unpacked something and made it like you weren't ashamed to talk about it, you actually could see the emotions and the ripple effect and the truth of what that actually meant to a community, to a family, to an individual. It took something that was sort of hidden below the surface and unpacked it in a really thoughtful way. And it started a huge conversation about teen suicide. We were able to work with hotlines and crisis centers so that when people were actually started searching, they would find somebody who wanted to help them. And it actually became like a 360 approach to diving really deep into a topic that was really important to talk about to a specific audience of people. And my goal is to be able to create more content like that. Content that takes topics that are like really important and really pervasive and surfaces them and allows people to have an open and honest dialogue with different types of people around the world. And to me, like, that's great storytelling. And I hope that the content that I can create can ladder up to that brand equity of Vice.
I'm really excited to see what you're going to do at Vice, because I will tell you, when that series came out, there was so much conversation, but it was so crucial. I'm a parent of a 25-year-old and a 20-year-old, but when that came out, they were teens. And I remember, why are you watching this? But you're absolutely right. It made it okay to talk about it. It made it okay to look at signs. But so I'm really excited what you're going to do with Vice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ziad, I'm going to pivot this question to you. You have, you work with and connect with brands with Gen Z. I would say it's an audience that is arguably the most attuned to performative messaging. How do you counsel brands to show up authentically in a space where the younger consumers can, they crave transparency, they crave cultural fluency, they don't want to be marketed to? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. I mean, there's no question, right, that Gen Z is increasingly skeptical of marketing, of businesses, of establishment entities. And why that often is I think this word authenticity is used as a buzzword often in marketing and business. I take the position that I don't think it's that hard, right? I think that things are authentic when they are authentic, and things are forced when they are forced. When a room full of people who look nothing like the audience that's trying to be served and make a decision about that community, it's going to feel forced because it is forced. When you have decision makers in the room who are creating the content, the product that's meant to reach a community from that community, who understand the interests of that community, it's going to feel authentic because it is authentic. Currently, we have a lot of brands where I ask them, tell me why you do what you do in one sentence. If they don't know the answer, if your employee doesn't know the answer, how the hell is your consumer going to know the answer? And this connects back to the first question that I said. We're all constantly thinking about what is the story that we are telling about ourselves. As a high schooler, when I watched 13 Reasons Why, and when I talked about it with my friends or posted on my story about the show, it's told a story that I was open to having a conversation around what kind of school environments, what kind of mental health crisis are we in and are we navigating? And that I was willing to participate in that conversation. We ought to know about the media and brands that are putting out into the world, what it says about us, to associate with that identity, to associate with that product, to associate with that property. And so our advice to brands is know who you are in one sentence. Yeah. And if that sentence is, we stand for fun, okay, blasé, I'll take it. But then the question cannot be, how do I make kids who are already having fun have more fun? The question has to be, how do we distribute fun to those who least have access to it? Right? What are we doing to schools that are underfunded, that don't have access to recreation? What are we doing for refugees who don't have access to recreation? That is how my mind works insofar as how purpose lives, because we can't stand for all things, but we ought to know who we are and be honest about it and show up for that iteratively with integrity And that's what we're also always counseling our brands to do.
Amazing. Thank you, Ziad. It is a very tough audience. You're right, and they're very skeptical. Also, with traditional media outlets, like they're questioning everything, and I think that's really, really fair what you said, Lauren. I'm going to navigate. You're navigating two different worlds, right? Like you've got philanthropic, nonprofit world meets like consumer product storytelling with Yogi Tea Foundation or the Yogi Foundation. Excuse me. How do you rethink what it means to sell a product when your brand mission is rooted in wellness and regeneration equity? And then what does it mean redefining philanthropy and looking at a consumer-facing world? Because you're sort of in this, when you talk about your brand, I've never really heard philanthropy talked about that way. So I'd love to, if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah, talking about the philanthropy is an opportunity for us, for sure. And we've been in that space for a long time. But I'll put my Yogi Tea hat on the commercial side. I think there's opportunity to not sell a product and rather create a story that articulates the benefit of a product, right? We talk a lot about impact, which I think similarly to authenticity has become a buzzword. What does impact mean? What's the benefit of this product? What is it delivering and what is it giving to someone, right, when they're engaging with it? Tell a story about that. And when I put my hat on the philanthropy side with the Yogi Foundation, which is where I'm more responsible for the storytelling, we're not selling anything. If anything, we're selling philanthropy, right? And so the stories that we're telling aspire to create a deeper connection with oneself, with others, and with the world around you, right? We want to inspire change by seeing examples of new possibility. So much of the content that exists out in the world today is inspiring fear. It's inspiring drama, right? And that downward spiral can be really powerful once you step into it. And so I think brands have a responsibility, including philanthropic organizations, to not just do good, but make good visible. Because people need to see an example of possibility to believe that it's true. If we want to reimagine a different future, we have to tell different stories. And so that's where I think redefining philanthropy is around storytelling. It's around creative collaboration. How can you bring people together through collaborative partnerships and tell a different story? Demonstrate a different way of being so that people believe that it's possible and they shift the way that they show up in the world.
Very well said. Actually, Adam, so going to kind of piggybacking off of storytelling, you're operating in internet speed, right? Snackable, relatable, very emotionally honest content. What does cultural relevance look like when you're working with this attention span of seconds? Literally, you're operating in a world of Gen Z who are just scrolling content. How does that look like?
I mean, I think one thing is when we speak with a lot of brands, the biggest question we get is, like, how do you work against the trends? The trends move so quickly, and how can we make sure that the content that we're doing is going to still be relevant by the time it comes out? And our answer is usually that great storytelling is timeless. You know, our biggest series is called Boy Room. It's a very serious investigative journalism program where we investigate disgusting men's bedrooms. We just launched a new show called Roommate Court, that is small claims court for roommate conflict in their apartments. And we made a show called Keep the Meter Running, where a comedian named Kareem Rama would hail a cab in New York and tell the driver, take me wherever you want to go and keep the meter running. And the reality is the shows that we focus on making are the ones that we ourselves can't stop watching. And they're not based on a modern trend. They might be tapping into conversations that we feel like our generation are having. You know, why are 30-year-old men still living like teenage boys? I can't tell you. But I can tell you that a lot of women have seen those bedrooms and are entertained by watching that program. I think with Roommate Court, you know, we had this initial thought of, we love court television. What's our way into making a court series? And our creative director, Damien Buchanan, came up with this idea of like, okay, well, young kids, teenagers and early 20-year-olds, like have a shit ton of roommate conflict. Why don't we make that the subject of the show? So it's relevant to them in that it's situations they likely have found themselves in, which makes it a much more shareable program. But we aren't sort of staying into the trends of like, what sound are we supposed to use? Or how can we integrate this, modern day influencer? Our shows feature undiscovered talent both in the host and in the guest. And we really rely on the highly engaging format to be the thing that drives viral traffic.
Very interesting. So this actually pivots great to my next question is like, in your current environment, how is your organization thinking about storytelling, not as a form of persuasion, because, right, we know people can't be sold, especially the younger generation, but as a driver of cultural participation and even maybe social change?
I think there is an opportunity to take pro-social issues and articulate them in a way that people can receive them, right? Like I was saying earlier, telling the story in a way that inspires change, inspires possibility, versus demonstrating the travesty and the devastation of what's going on in the world. And we actually have a clip of a story that we recently developed that we could show. We did a series of films around our ingredients and honed in on our farmers and some of the work that we're doing in community development around the world, India, Sri Lanka, and Guatemala. So the film we'll show is with our cinnamon farmers in Sri Lanka. And this is a way for us to inspire conversation around regenerative practices and sustainable farming, right? Organic food.
Cinnamon. Is that you? Blending into the hillside? Waiting for those hands that know you like prayer and peel you like scripture. Written in rainfall. Somewhere in between the skeleton of these fingers are the secrets you keep. Carving layer after layer after layer, we go deep into the curl of your burning heart. In a dusty barn, in the near dark. Cinnamon, my dear, they paid dearly for you. You who kept company with kings and froze the pharaoh's flesh in time. Those fires that burned when they fought for you, burn in you too. Dilate my capillaries, you smoldering spice girl, with a cinnamaldehyde scent. Show me how to taste the bitter and the sweet.
Mother and daughter put the finishing touches.
While you go on forever, growing. Ancient as dreams.
So more to come with the ingredient films. They're going to be released with LA Times this fall. But the essence of these films is to inspire inspiration, appreciation, and connection with where our food comes from. But we've unpacked and done rigorous research to understand the lives of these individuals, these farmers, how these ingredients are cultivated, and the life, the culture, the ritual, the pastime of the life around them that we then enjoy on the other side of the world, right? So that's how we're approaching storytelling now.
Very cool. I guess the next question would be for everybody. There's always tension between, creative ambition, cultural authenticity, and then the business side. We're all running pro-profit businesses, except for you, you're on the nonprofit side, but the rest of us are pro-profit businesses. But you're trying to raise funds and you're still trying to make impact. I really want to understand from each of you as leaders in your organization, how do you personally navigate that? Are there any trade-offs that you're making, or is it worth making, and which ones are not? So I don't know if anybody wants to tackle this one first.
I can go. I'll be brief. At Yogi and the Yogi Foundation, we say impact is the strategy and revenue is the outcome, right? Creative collaboration and storytelling that has meaning, that's not just selling a product, can actually scale, but it scales by deepening connection, not diluting it. And so I think there's an opportunity here with storytelling to shift the ways in which we engage with brands and products so that you feel connected to it, you understand the benefit and the value.
Great.
Look, I started a nonprofit when I was 13 years old, right? Around social change and social acceptance. And through that, I found myself at a very young age in rooms that I did not know existed. At the White House with industry leaders, with decision makers, where I realized how often young people were being spoken about but not spoken to, and that didn't sit right with me. And so the mission of my business, Juice Consulting, has always been that we exist to empower more diverse young people with a substantive seat at the table. For the last 10 years, we have hustled against that mission in every possible way, bringing us here and bringing us to ultimately be acquired by United Talent Agency last year. When I think about this question, of course, there is tension. In my experience running a business while trying to stay true to my mission, there have been many moments that have profoundly challenged me as a CEO, as a human being, as a political progressive, as a young person, and it would be a lie to say otherwise. Every day I am challenged by the reality that I find myself here at Cannes Lion, where we wax poetic about caring about the mental health of young people, but we sell and market products as if they will make your life better, that they will make your life best. And so much of the moral conundrum that we find ourselves in is that young people have been raised by media to believe that their life can and will be perfect, and then it's not. And that's a really hard reality to sit with and contend with. And we wax poetic about the imperative of sustainability and climate change. Meanwhile, we erect structures to tear down 7 days later, and we love it here. And we make amazing friends and amazing memories, and real impact does happen here. But I sit in that juxtaposition every single day and every moment that I'm taking up space as an American Muslim, as a progressive, in the rooms that I am navigating, and my intention and my hope is that more diverse young people being open and honest about the conundrum and juxtaposition inherent within navigating the spaces that we are, that in time, our spaces will hopefully become more honest, right? More in line with our values, where we don't have to work profit against purpose, but hopefully that these two things can align, because I believe that there is no revenue to be had in a planet that does not exist, right? There is no revenue to be had in a world without human rights, right? Where humans are not actually getting to profit off of the profits that we're making, right? And I think that we ought to construct new and different realities and tables, and it's my hope that our work can do that through proxy of storytelling and platforming more of us with a seat at the table. Thank
you. Amy or Adam, anyone of you guys want to kind of chime in? Amy, you want to go first?
Quickly. Hard to follow my friends, yeah.
I know he's so passionate. I feel like
I know.
I'm so caught up in your answer. Like I don't even think about my follow-up question.
So I produce television and film, and I'll just give one example. I produced this show called Jack Ryan, and what was great about Jack Ryan was each season allowed us the opportunity to dip into a different geopolitical conflict. And TV shows, I'm sure you guys know, are created by one showrunner who hires a writer's room. And the writer's room is intentionally made up, to Ziad's point, of a diverse group of people who can tell all different political sides of a story, or all different shades of a character, or all different, character arcs on a different journey, because all writers come from different backgrounds and bring different perspectives. And so for me, being able to tell stories that can scale and that you can actually tell big journeys is what I'm interested in doing, because I want to have really big outsized impact. And to do so, I need to be able to find stories that might start in one geographical destination, but be able to scale into all different parts of the world. And that's characters and journeys that people want to follow because they see reflections of themselves, but that they also see the entire world palette, and they're interested in dipping into other people's cultures. And so my goal at Vice is to be able to take some of the IP that we have in terms of our magazines and the documentaries that we produce and be able to extract those into scripted narrative television, where we're telling these big global stories, but in an intimate way through the lens of character.
Amy also previously worked with us in her last role as the head of entertainment marketing at Amazon, where after we had released Boy Room, we formerly used to just really roast these men with disgusting bedrooms. And Amy was the first person to call us and say, I think we could do a little bit more than just roast them. We could give them a brand new bedroom. And why don't we start renovating these bedrooms? And so with Amy, we ended up doing a 16-episode partnership season with Amazon that's going to continue on, where we started renovating the bedrooms of the show itself. And that was sort of one of the top comments. The top comment on every episode was a girl saying, "I can fix him." But the second top comment was, "Why don't we fix the bedrooms?" And that was what we were able to do with Amazon. So I think in terms of monetizing this content, if you can prove that you really do have that sticky audience, if you have a viral, engaged, young audience, of course brands want to figure out how to be able to reach that audience as well. And I think finding a way for a brand to authentically show up in that content is huge.
You also mentioned stakeholder engagement and accountability, and working inside a CPG company, I think that's a really important piece, because you have a lot of people who you're accountable for. And I do see in general organizations are shifting from a short-term focus to a long-term focus. They want to be able to exist over the long term, over the next 50 years. And that means a shift in mindset and a shift of financial planning, of forecasting, of the ways in which they're investing in internal capabilities, right? And at least I've found at Yogi, what we come back to is the why. If we're all grounded in purpose, we can all come back to that well consistently to be reminded of the intention and why we're doing something. And that ends up being the rallying coming together that allows us to push through even the shitty quarters. So I'd say grounding in intention and purpose and the why is critically important for an organization's long-term success.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to fast forward us. It's now 2030. What's one storytelling strategy, platform, narrative, approach that you believe that will define the most impactful and resilient brands of the future? So we're 5 years ahead. We got AI evolving by the day, if not the minute. So what do you think it would be? Adam, do you want to take this one?
I mean, I think really having a singular voice as a brand, that is really the only thing that's going to stand the test of time. At the end of the day, like I said, I think AI is going to start breaking a lot of these platforms because the amount of content that will be uploaded on a daily basis. The baseline is now everyone has the ability to be mediocre. I think what I often say is, like, if you were to go on YouTube right now and type like Bangkok, Thailand, you'd probably have a dozen videos that were posted in the last 6 months that have a very similar script, that went to the same locations, with the same font in the video, the same music choices, and they're all fine. They're all fine. I'm a big believer that the next Anthony Bourdain, someone who has a real voice and a reason to be in that location, would still be at the top of that platform and the highest performing character, because it's someone who actually has a real voice and a vision of why they're supposed to be there in the first place. So I think we at Gymnasium are big believers of, like, finding the true characters who deserve to be on camera, who have real voices, because that is the only thing that will be human in an era that will be increasingly unhuman.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. That I think that what I'm so certain of is that young people are absolutely still consuming content on traditional and digital, are absolutely still purchasing, are absolutely still dreaming and consuming and living, and we are hopeful that a better tomorrow is possible. I think a lot of that hope, when you ask any person, when's the last time you were hopeful, it often comes back to a young person in their life. Maybe it's their kid, maybe it's someone they saw on TikTok, but it's a human voice of someone who dared to think differently and dream outside of the box. What I am so certain of is in this reality, where more and more things are digitized and anonymized and feel so far away from our humanity, it is the platforms, the stories that democratize more access to the microphone and create permission and space for people to speak candidly with authenticity and honesty with said microphone that I think will cut through the noise, right? There are so many voices and stories that still aren't being heard, right? That are still being silenced or marginalized. And some of those might be really impact-driven. Some of those just might be hilarious, right? Some of those might be silly. Some of those might be entrepreneurial. But there's so many people who've been gate-kept from the conversation. What short-form video has done is un-gatekeep a lot of conversations, create a lot of access for people like me and Adam to even be in these seats at our age, right? That we got to use these tools to take up space and be heard by folks like Amy, who invested in us and partnered with us because she saw something in our stories and saw the opportunity to tell bigger and more stories and different stories together. I think it is that connection intergenerationally, it is that vision and foresight to say, despite the overwhelming rhetoric that tells us Gen Z loves Web3, clearly not. It didn't work. We're not there. I'm not in the metaverse. Are you? Right? I'm here with you all. Right? And beating hearts in one room still pushes so much culture and commerce. And so I think it's not listening to the noise and instead listening to the heartbeat of humanity and passing the microphone as often as we can. And any platforms and stories that do that, I think in the long run will be really successful.
Thank you, Ziad. Amy?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like, curiosity drives all innovation. But I don't know, it's interesting. I think that intimacy and, like, human connection one-on-one is actually driving, if we look at those mini dramas that are really rising, it's like a lot of soap operas, actually. And this interest in people of, like, sort of voyeuristically looking into somebody else's life to see what their romances look like, what their relationships look like, how their life is falling apart or coming together. And I think this, like, sort of voyeuristic look into the intimacy of other people's relationships as everybody gets sort of more distant and fragmented from their own community is really interesting. So as much as I have told, I don't know if anybody here has ever read Neil Stephenson's book, Snow Crash, but it's this very, like, dystopic view of what's going to happen in the future, and I hope that it's not true. But I think in a world where AI and technology are completely undeniable, what's not is like human relations and their interests and love and feelings that are real and move you. And so I'm super interested in what's going to happen with these like little intimate soap operas and, you know, I sort of would call YAs and romances, and how can you then take those and scale them into more global platform?
Beautiful. What an amazing panel. I think the future of brand storytelling is co-authorship. It's not going to be the loudest brand. It's going to be the brand that creates platforms to share stories of other individuals, right? Amplifying other voices. And I think it's not just about the consistency of a voice, but it's also the consistency in just honoring your values and showing up with integrity. Brands are also like humans. We all evolve, we trip and fall, we make mistakes, and we learn and we grow. Brands need to respond in the same way. So beyond co-authorship, I think it'll be an aspect of deeply listening to what the world needs and where there's opportunity to inspire change.